Imagine being trapped in a cave no one has ever mapped. The air going stale, your body breaking down, and your mind slipping. For Wong Arllo, this wasn't imagination. The real GoPro footage from this incident reveals what happened. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. This is Furong Town, Western Hunan, China. On the surface it looks calm, waterfalls and cliffs, and a river that runs green through the mountains. But just below the river is a cave that locals still talk about. Years earlier, a team of professional divers tried to map its entrance. They had top-of-the-line gear, backup crews on the surface, and everything you would need for a full exploration. 9 meters down, the cave pinches sideways into the mountain. The current doesn't just pull forward, it yanks divers into blind corners. On one dive, 2 men got slammed into a side passage and just vanished. Their teammates looked around for a little bit, but then realized they were gone. Nobody had ever made it out from that kind of trap before. They turned back, assuming they'd die trying. But against all odds, the missing divers stumbled into the right way out. When they surfaced, they were out of air, coughing, and so shaken that they all quit diving for the rest of their lives. Their survival didn't make sense. For most divers who heard the story, the conclusion was obvious. This wasn't just a risky cave, it was an obvious death trap. For Wong Arllo, well, he didn't really see it that way. At 40 years old, diving was something that he was obsessed with. Any free time he had, he was in the water. When he first heard about what happened to the pros, he couldn't get it out of his head. He became obsessed with the whole story and all the danger and things that surrounded the entire event. Friends told him to stay away from that cave, but he just laughed in their faces, kind of just shaking his head, insisting that the cave was probably easy and they just didn't know what they were doing. He never had a close call before, so this made total sense. To him, it was just another dive, another cave that was waiting to be mapped. They told him to drop it, but he didn't. Inside, he'd already made the decision that he was going to go in. So on July 19th, 2025, at about 3 in the morning, Wong geared up on the banks of the river. Scuba tank strapped to his back, light in hand, wetsuit clinging tight. He slipped into the water and then dropped down. At first, everything felt manageable. The river was cold, but not too bad, and the current did tug at him pretty hard, more than what he'd been used to, but he decided it wasn't enough for him to turn back. He dropped about 9 meters and saw it, the mouth of the cave. It was kind of just a shadow in the little rock wall leading into more blackness. So he decided to swim straight in. Instantly, he started to feel uneasy. The current started to pick up more, pushing him hard against the cave passage wall. It scraped through his wetsuit and was painful. He tried to push off, but he couldn't. The current was sticking him to the wall. He started hyperventilating and looked down at his air gauge. And to his surprise, he already had burned through a lot of his air. Having never experienced this before, he had no idea what to do. He then had a new problem. The spot he pushed himself into started to narrow and it began to squeeze him. He slowly pulled himself through the tight passage until it eventually started to widen again. His scraped sides were hurting more at this point, but the adrenaline of having such a close call, getting stuck and then getting back out, made the pain fade away. To him, things were back on track, but he had to cut this exploration short now because he had already lost so much of his air. He made a weird decision and pressed deeper, about 100 meters into the cave. That's when it hit him. He couldn't resurface for air. He was in a cave and forgot that the only way that he could reach the surface was by swimming back out through the entrance. With his chest pounding with panic, he realized he would never make it back in time. He swam over to the passage wall to hold on while the current picked up again and tried to nudge him further inside the cave. He thought about his family and that if he gave up now, it was just game over. So he stopped thinking and just started swimming back in the direction of where he thought the cave entrance was. He forced himself to stay calm. While working his way down the passage, he swept his light around slowly, searching for any kind of opening. And then, by chance, he saw something above him, a small gap in the ceiling. He swam up, broke the surface, and for the first time since he entered, his head was in open air. He checked his gauge again, and this time, it was nearly out. He had about 5 minutes left, but the current had already pushed him about 30 minutes into the cave. The air pocket that he was in was tiny, maybe just a couple meters across. He could breathe. He pulled out his regulator one last time and filled up his lungs. It felt like a win, gave him a huge sense of relief, but then tears started to fall down his face as he processed what had just happened. In that moment, Wong probably thought it was just temporary. His family would notice that he was gone, and then authorities would come. He just had to wait it out. But what he didn't know was this pocket of air, this little hole in the middle of the cave system, was totally unknown. There was no reason for anyone to believe that he was trapped in an air pocket in a completely unmapped cave system that had almost killed 2 divers. He had no idea what cave rescue protocol was and wasn't sure if they would even make an attempt to save him, or if he would just die in that pocket once the breathable air was gone. Most water-filled caves have air that isn't breathable, so the fact that he could breathe in that little pocket was already a miracle. The first few hours in that pocket felt endless. Wong was fighting just to stay above the waterline. The space was too small to stretch out and too slick to sit down. So he had to wedge himself in place, pressing his back against one wall and his legs braced against the other, just trying not to slide back under. It was awkward, exhausting, and painful, but it was all he could do. While Wong was crammed in this tiny pocket of air, counting breaths and wondering if anyone was ever going to find him, the world above him was moving fast. His family sounded the alarm. He hadn't surfaced when he should have, and they knew something was wrong. Eventually, the rescue team started hauling gear down to the riverbank at Furong Town. The first search dive set the tone. 2 divers went in with full rigs, guide ropes trailing behind them. They got about 60 meters into the cave before conditions forced them to stop. Visibility was garbage. Even with their lights on, they could barely see a half a meter in front of them. Every fin kick stirred up clouds of silt, and once the water turned brown, you couldn't see anything. They pulled back, surfaced, and just shook their heads. From their perspective, the cave just kept going, and they hadn't found a trace of Wong. The divers all agreed that this was a body recovery and that there was 0 chance that Wong was still alive. That's what they told his family, who sat huddled under umbrellas at the bank, refusing to leave. Then, they tried bringing in a robot, a remotely operated vehicle with a camera. It was dropped into the water and sent down the cave. People crowded around a grainy little monitor on the surface, hoping. 60 meters, 70, 80. At 89 meters, the cable ran out and the screen went blank. Nothing. He wasn't in the robot's reach. Rescuers were honest. If he drowned, the body could be wedged into a crevice or washed downstream. His family asked quietly if there was still hope, and rescuers told them the only thing they could. It was possible. Cave divers had been found alive in air pockets before. The 4th day was brutal. Divers had logged dozens of hours underwater. The rain hadn't stopped. The command post was now a little soggy camp, radios under tarps, and maps that were spread across folding tables. Volunteers brought hot tea and food, but nobody really ate. They were running on adrenaline and frustration. Every time a diver surfaced empty-handed, you could feel the morale sink lower. By nightfall on the 4th day, the rescuers were considering calling the whole thing off. It was just too dangerous, and the divers had had enough of risking their own lives for Wong. Every minute this recovery dragged on was another chance for a diver to drown in the cave. When dawn broke on the 5th day, the river was higher than ever. Wong was lucky because one of the lead divers said that he would keep going. He suited up again, and this time he was determined to push deeper than he ever had. It was a huge risk for him, and this was out of his own experience and comfort zone. The other rescue divers tried to confront him and tell him not to go back in again. He said he would take one last shot, and that was it. Once he went into the cave and came back out empty-handed, hope was gone. The rescue diver packed up his gear, and they closed the scene and ended the operation. This was the atmosphere when reinforcements rolled in. At dawn, a convoy of trucks pulled up carrying 11 men from Baze's special police unit. They were professional divers who trained specifically for cave rescues. The moment they stepped out of those trucks, the mood shifted. They didn't waste any time. Gear came out in neat stacks. Spools of guide rope, crates of tanks, heavy-duty lamps, and underwater comm systems. The locals had been giving it everything they had for the last 4 days straight, but this was different. These guys moved with quiet confidence. They were the ones called when nothing else had worked. Their leader, Lang, a senior officer, got a quick rundown from the local command. By then, the cave had been mapped into fragments from the rescuers, but it was still overwhelmingly unmapped. Lang's plan was blunt and simple: push deeper, chamber by chamber, until they either found Wong or they eliminated every possibility. That afternoon, the first team dropped in. Fully kitted out, double air systems, reels clipped to their harnesses, and lights that could burn through the murk. They went slow, careful, sweeping their beams into every shadow, checking every bubble of trapped air. One chamber, nothing. Another chamber, empty. They found 4 air pockets in total, but every single one was lifeless. When they came back up, their eyes said what their mouths didn't. He wasn't there. Still, they weren't done. The second team suited up immediately. This time it was 2 men, Yan Ming and Liu Chengzi, who would push further than anyone had yet dared. They knew what they were walking into: zero visibility, narrow squeezes, and unpredictable current. They also knew that the man that they were trying to save was probably already gone. They dropped into the entrance, following the same guideline, but instead of stopping where the others had, they kept going. 60 meters, 70, 80, 90, the cave walls pressed in tight, then suddenly opened into another chamber. Nothing. They kept moving. Their lights hit nothing but haze and stone. Every breath in their regulators hissed loud in their ears. And then, just 100 meters in, they broke into a 5th chamber. Their lights swept across the water, and something flickered back. At first, they thought it was a trick, just a flash of silt, or maybe their own light bouncing weirdly. Then it came again. A beam. Weak, shaky, but deliberate. Someone was signaling. It was him. They surged forward, hearts pounding. At the far end, wedged against the wall like a man trying to fuse himself into the rock, was Wong Arllo. He looked impossibly small, pale, streaked with dirt and exhaustion. His legs braced against the stone to keep him from sliding in the water, and his hand, a flashlight, shook wildly, the beam swinging back and forth like he was begging them not to disappear. Yan reached out a hand. Wong's response was frantic. Words tumbled out too fast to make sense. A flood of relief and desperation all at once. Liu moved closer, palms up, trying to calm him. His voice carried through the comms, steady and slow, but even without the words, Wong could read their body language. "You're safe. We've got you." Liu unclipped one of his own tanks without hesitation and shoved it towards Wong, and then guided him through the swap. Wong fumbled at first. His fingers clumsy from exhaustion. His brain wasn't working correctly, but finally, he did get his regulator in. His chest expanded as he drew in a clean breath of air. His eyes closed and open again, dazed but calmer. They had found him. The miracle part was over. The next came that impossible task, getting him out alive. Back in the cave, Yang clipped Wong to their guide rope. One diver leading, one behind to steady him. Every move had to be deliberate. They pushed off, inch by inch, retracing the path back toward daylight. The rope was everything, their lifeline. Yang pulled gently in front, Liu guided from behind, stopping whenever Wong faltered. At each chamber, they paused, adjusted their gear, checked his breathing, and then urged him forward again. Minutes stretched into forever. The glow of the daylight seemed impossibly far away, but then, faint at first, it appeared, a shimmer of light filtering down from the cave mouth. When Wong saw it, something broke inside of him. He let out a sound, half laugh, half sob, and he pushed with whatever strength he had left. And then his head broke the surface. The river erupted, everyone was cheering and shouting, and his family cried out openly, reaching for him as rescuers hauled him onto the bank. And Wong? Well, the first thing out of his mouth, after 5 days of being trapped in black water, after balancing between life and death, he screamed out, "Does anyone have a cigarette?" Even the divers laughed in disbelief. The tension of the last 5 days cracked in an instant. For the rescuers, it wasn't just relief, it was awe. Against all odds, in a cave that should have killed him a dozen times over, Wong Arllo had survived. And with that being said, I just want to thank you for making it through the video. If you enjoyed this one, please give it a quick like and subscribe, it really goes a long way. I have more episodes in the works, and I look forward to seeing you at the next one.